Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, let's discuss Nazareth, Hair of the Dog, and Expect No Mercy. This is also going to be a tribute to Nazareth's vocalist, Dan McCafferty, who sadly passed away on November 8th of 2022. Dan has an amazing, very, very unique voice, which really defines this band for me. When he first passed, it took me a little bit of time to make this video, and people were asking if I was going to do one. And the reason why I didn't do one right away is, honestly, I don't know a whole heck of a lot about Nazareth. They're one of these bands that I'm not quite sure why, but I just didn't discover them till later and haven't put a lot of time into listening to them. And considering what a fan I am of 70s heavy rock, it just surprises me. But you know, there's so many bands out there that sometimes there's just these bands that you know about them, you like them. It isn't a case of like I didn't like them. I always liked what I heard from them, but I just never had a lot of their stuff. And you know, I just never dived into their catalog really. You know, Golden Earring is another band that I've been recently getting into that was like, man, how did I miss out on these guys? And as I was really getting into these two Nazareth albums, I was like, man, I got to dive more into their catalog because these are two really fantastic albums. And I just love Dan's voice on these. It's so powerful. It's so unique. He's got this really gritty, bluesy, aggressive sounding voice. And I think back to this time in the early mid-70s, and I don't know if there was anybody else that really had this much grit and dirt and this kind of power on their voice back then. I mean, there's singers that sort of used that here and there, but he was just full on with the grit and the dirt on his voice, and it just sounds fantastic. And there's, you know, people that have incorporated that sound into their voice now, but back then, man, I think he just had a really, really great, unique voice for that era of hard rock. And these are just two really great hard rock albums. So we're going to start with Hair of the Dog. And this is the album that probably people might be most familiar with because of the song Hair of the Dog, that Now You're Messing With a Son of a Bitch. That song and the song Love Hurts, which they both got a lot of airplay, at least here in the States on US radio. The album was produced by the band's guitarist Manny Charlton, who sadly, he's also passed away. He passed away in July of 2022. And the production on this record is just fantastic. I love it. You know, you'll hear me use the expression, it's a very crankable album. Well, for me, that means it's very warm. It's got a lot of nice low end to it. It's not harsh or trebly, and you can just turn it up and it just gets stronger and more punchy as you turn it up. And that's this album. The guitars sound great on this. The drums sound great. The vocals are just right there. It's just a really, really well-produced album for 1975, which is when this album came out, April of 1975, and it's their 6th studio album. There's also Pete Agnew on bass and Daryl Sweet on drums, who also has sadly passed away in April of 1999. So the album starts with Hair of the Dog, which is a fantastic, cool, heavy blues riff with a bit of a groove and a swing to it. You know, as I listen to these Nazareth albums, it makes me think of kind of the heavier blues side of Led Zeppelin. I hear some of that in Nazareth. It's a great song, super catchy chorus. One of my first cover bands that played regular gigs. We were kind of a hard rock metal band, and we used to play this song. I just always loved playing this song. I love at the end of the song when the bass just starts chugging on the same note, and they're singing the chorus over and over. Just great song. Miss Misery, another fantastic heavy blues rock number. Love Hurts, ballad with some fantastic vocals from Dan. This is actually an Everly Brothers cover. I never realized that till I was doing the research for this album. We used to cover this song in that cover band that I was in. It was one of the few ballads that we did, but just a great song, very well done. Changing Times, great heavy, twisting blues main riff, almost like a stoner rock thing that you would hear, you know, the stoner rock bands of the future doing. It's got this call and response thing between the riff and the vocals. It reminds me of Black Dog from Led Zeppelin again here, you know, bring up Led Zeppelin comparisons. Beggar's Day is a song written by Nils Lofgren. It's got a really sinister riff and vibe to it. But at the end of the song, it goes into this other section, which is titled Rose and the Heather, that changes the mood of the song, and it has this more brighter, happier feel to it, which I think is really cool, the contrast between the main part of the song and sort of the outro ending. Whiskey Drinking Woman, old kind of classic blues feel to it, and it deals with, you know, the blues, common blues theme of the evil woman, you know, ready to steal your soul. In this case, she's gonna steal your whiskey. All right, so just a great album. I love the production on it. Oh, and the album ends with "Please Don't Judas Me," this really cool, brooding, kind of trippy number, and it has tablas in it, which are like these hand drums, and they're played by Simon Phillips, who's a studio musician who would go on to be hired to play drums on Judas Priest's Sin After Sin albums. Just a little interesting trivia there. Now, Expect No Mercy is their 9th studio album. This was released in November of 1977. Still produced by the guitar player, Manny. And for me, the production on this one is not quite as heavy. It's not quite as warm to me. It still sounds good, but it just doesn't have quite the same heft and warmness to it that Hair of the Dog does. But it's still pretty cool, and the album overall in general is not as heavy as Hair of the Dog, so I think that's why I kind of prefer Hair of the Dog. It's got a really cool album cover, though. Frank Frazetta, who was a classic, legendary fantasy artist. So very, very cool album cover. As was the Hair of the Dog album cover. I always thought that was a pretty cool, heavy-looking cover. The back of it, too. Just as song titles. The title track, Expect No Mercy, is probably the heaviest song on the album. It's almost like a proto-metal type of song with a nice driving riff and a very catchy chorus, really intense vocal delivery from Dan. Again, the vocals sound fantastic all of this record. Gone, Dead Train, very kind of blues rock for me. Reminds me a little like CCR, heavier CCR, heavy Rolling Stones. Maybe the chorus, this always reminds me of the chorus of Jumpin' Jack Flash by the Stones. Give Me What's Mine, another hard rockin' blues through the main riff there. Probably my second favorite track on the album, just for its heaviness. Then another song that jumped out at me was the song Kentucky Fried Blues. It's an old school blues thing, but instead of an evil woman here stealing your soul or whiskey, it's about truck stop, greasy food, and the dangers of that, which I think is pretty cool and pretty fun. So, okay, Nazareth, Expect No Mercy, and Hair of the Dog, two really cool, heavy, hard rock 70s albums. And I've really got to dive more into the Nazareth catalog, as I also have No Mean City and Malice in Wonderland. So I've got to dive into these albums more because I was just really enjoying these, and what a sad loss it is to have lost Dan McCafferty, because he has such a cool, unique, powerful voice that for me really defines this band. So, all right, there you go. Let me know what you guys think of these two albums in the comments down below. Dan McCafferty, rest in peace, and until we see you again, make sure you rock hard.